All right, everyone. So one of the bigger topics I want to talk about is adding in a UI or canvas into your VR worlds. Now, when we were doing Unity, you might remember that we might add a canvas. So if you might have remembered, and I went over this when I did sort of my Unity review, how we might add a canvas, right? And that canvas would allow you to place things like images and um buttons and things like that, right? And it would kind of be overlaid on top of your thing. So for instance, if I went into here and I added in say an image, it's going to make a little thing here. You'll notice that it appears in the lower left hand corner, right? So if I kind of did that, it should move to like there. Now, the problem with VR is they don't really have a good way to have that sort of overlay. Like the way you have to think about what's happening here is like imagine it's like a piece of glass that's like in front of your face, and every time you move, that glass kind of follows you. Unfortunately, for VR, it doesn't quite work that way. So we are going to add a canvas, but and the reason why we might want to add a canvas is so that we can either put in text or we might put in, for instance, maybe a button to turn something on or off. And that's what we're going to do in this lab, but it can't necessarily be an overlay. Okay. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. And um, if you wanted to set a canvas for VR, there's a couple things you would want to do. One of them is under canvas, you would want to make sure under render mode, instead of screen space is essentially like your device. So a screen space would be like the monitor of your computer or your cell phone screen or your, tablet screen or something like that. Instead, we actually want it set to world space. Okay. Now, world space, like it sounds like, is like we're in this world. It basically what it kind of does is it turns your canvas into a literal sort of 3D object that can be placed. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to like move this. Like, let's set that to 0, 0. Still too big, but and so I could like literally place it kind of like the way, remember how we talked about having like flats or like a plane that it just exists in your 3D world. Think of it like that, except you can interact with it. And so that's what this would do if I put it in world space. Um, you'd want to set up your camera, so that would actually come from your XR rig. So I came here, I would put my camera there. Another thing we would actually want is I would want a tracked device graphic raycaster. Okay. This is something that's not normally added to a regular sort of game overlay user interface, but could be very helpful here. So what this basically means is that your raycaster, like when you shoot rays from your ray interactor, can interact with this. Because otherwise, the way you would have to do it would be like using like a mouse or a keyboard. And obviously in a VR world, we're not going to do that. So essentially what this does is essentially allows you to use ray interactions to interact with the screen. Okay. Now what I'm actually going to do is an easier way to do this. So you could do this by hand like I just did. You also could literally just go into game object XR and then set this to UI canvas. And basically it'll automatically add those in. So you'll notice this is already set to world space. And it already adds in the track device raycaster that I was asking, that I wanted you guys to do. And what I'm going to do is just kind of shrink this down. And I'm just going to put this here. And so a lot of the things we talked about with UI and 427 and my review, we can do that here. So what I'm going to do is I have in my environment here, I have a kind of a monster and I have this treasure chest. And what I want to do is I want to turn on, I'm going to have like a little interactive button that can, when it's interacted with the Raycaster, will turn on this object, okay? Now in this environment, I already actually have the XR rig right here. I only set up one controller, so there's only one Raycaster. And the other thing that's kind of important, I'll come back to it later, but we're going to have to add something that's going to allow us to interact with buttons, which we normally don't have under the normal Ray Interactor options. We'll talk about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a new canvas, and let's call this monster canvas. And it's going to be like real big. Okay, and I'm going to shrink this bad boy down. Defaultly, it's about a width of 100 by 100. Maybe I'm going to make this 300 by 300. And just so it's a little bit bigger in terms of, because remember, canvases are where all of the text and the images would have to go. And it's still really big. So why don't we shrink this down? And it may help to go into 2D mode here. All right. And what I'm going to do is I have this canvas, and let's add right now it's basically invisible. You can see it here in the sort of preview mode, but you won't be able to see anything when you go in game mode or, you were to export it to your VR. So what I'm going to do is go under user interface and let's add a panel. And what that basically does is you'll notice it kind of adds this kind of semi-transparent background. Still really big. So I'm going to shrink down the canvas. And I'm going to place it kind of over here. Maybe not quite that far right or left, I should say. And all right, that's pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I added this so you can kind of see it. If I click on panel, I'm just going to recall this background so that, I'm just using it as a background color. Right now it's using kind of a default image. If you wanted to put an image in here, you could. I'll show you guys how to do that. You could, set a color here. Defaults to white, but if I did red, you can see that it's red, or I could set it to, green or blue or something like that. By default, it's usually semi-transparent. So this is the alpha. So if I set it to 0 on alpha, it's invisible. If I set it to 255, it's solid, right? And what I'm going to do is let's add some text to this. So I'm just going to go under game mode. And I'm going to go under user interface and let's add text with TextMesh Pro. If you don't have it already installed, it may ask you to install the TextMesh Pro package. And if that happens, just say okay. And what this is going to allow me to do is add text to my project. And I'm going to go in here, and this is where I'm going to have the button. And I'm going to say make monster visible. Okay. And you can play around with the font size here. And I'm just going to place the text here. In terms of fonts, you can see I'm working with this default font called Liberation Sans. Let's say I wanted to add in my own fonts. So I added in a couple of fonts that I downloaded from Google Fonts. I'm assuming you guys know how to download fonts by now, hopefully. And I put them into my project. One is called Luckiest Guy, one is called Gorditas, and one is called Zen Dots. Now let's just hypothetically say I wanted to use Zen Dots as my typeface here. What I would need to do is I need to convert this font into something that TextMesh Pro can work with. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is go under Window and TextMesh Pro, and I'm going to go under where it says Font Asset Creator. And I'm just going to drag this into here. And I'm going to click where it says create font atlas. Okay, what that does is it basically converts this into something that TextMesh Pro can work with. And then I need to save that font. So I just want to make sure you save it in your package. So it's already saving into the fonts folder, but you would want to just, decide where you put it. Just have it somewhere in the asset folder should be fine. And I'm going to hit save. Okay. And you can see how I have this little icon here. See that means I can work with this with TextMesh Pro. Let's do another one. I'm going to do that again. And let's say I want to use Gorditas. I'm going to drop that in there. This shows you all the variations of it. Great font atlas. Once again, I'm going to save this. Let's put it into the same folder. Okay. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to my text. And if I go under font asset, I should have Zendots and Gorditas as an option, which I do. So I'm going to use Zendots. Okay. So I have this text, which is this make monster visible. Now I actually want the button that's people are going to interact with. The text by itself doesn't do anything. It's just text. If you want to change the text color, you can do that. There are ways of doing like, background or, drop shadows and such. So I'm going to add a button by going to user interface. And what I'm going to do is button TextMesh Pro. Okay. So buttons let you interact. Okay. Now I get this button here. And I'm just going to place it there. And this represents the button, and then this represents the text of the button. So when I want to kind of set it up that the button's going to say, activate, maybe, to mean turning the, monster on. So let's come into here, and I'm just going to say activate. And I don't know, let's use that new Gorditas fonts, even though I don't think it's that great, but whatever. Just to show we can do it. And I'm going to bold it, and let's shrink the size just a little bit. Okay. That's kind of what oops, if I misspelled it. Activate with 1A there. Okay. Let's say I wanted to change the background of the button here. That's actually under the button. And, this is the actual image, this button image. Okay. You could set it to none if you didn't want anything. And then that would basically give me, and here's where you can set the color. So, if I set this, I guess, do they still, oops. Sorry, they're using the image sprite here. So I could change, let's say I change this to none. That would kind of stop the rounded edges. And then I'm going to I could change that color, but I actually let's make the button kind of transparent. So I'm going to set this background color to none. Okay. And that looks pretty good. This would mean if I wanted a highlighted color, so maybe I could do that. Okay. Most important thing is the on click, which means what happens when someone clicks on this button. And what I want to do is turn on the monster. So we're going to go under monster, which is under my environment, put that in there. And then what I basically want to do is turn on the set active, and that will turn it on. Okay. And so if I were to save and try this out, and I would turn off the monster is kind of off. Sorry, I need to turn it off here. Okay. What this would do is if I were to save and run my world, if I click on that button with my Raycaster, it would turn on the monster. Okay. I'm going to make another, you can have more than one canvas. Let's say this is one area. I'm going to have another area where I can affect this, let me get out of 2D mode for a second. I'll affect this treasure chest. So let's make another canvas. Oops, let's use XR canvas. Okay. By the way, when you make a canvas the first time, it should make an event system. If you accidentally deleted that, just make sure you add an event system. If you don't, your canvases won't work. All right, so I'm going to make another canvas, and I'm going to call this one Treasure Chest Canvas. All right. And it's already kind of set up here. And once again, I'm going to make this like 300 by 300. And I'm going to have to shrink this down very small. Okay. Still too big, so I'm just going to use the scale tool here and kind of scale it. That might be actually a little too small. Oops, did I not rename it? Treasure chest. Yes. Okay. And I think, yeah, they're about the same. They're in the same level. I'm going to add a background to that one. So I'm going to go under Object and UI Panel. And I'm going to call this one background just so we know what it does or what it's for. Remember I talked about having a image rather than a, just the kind of the default. Now, what happens here is if I click, I have some images here. This is an image that I found online. And normally when you bring in an image, it's probably going to be set to default. Okay. And if I came under background, if I tried to sort of drag this here, it's not going to let me do that. Okay. This would have to be a what's called a sprite. Okay. So a sprite is a 2D, two-dimensional image like a JPEG or a PNG or something that can be used in user interface elements like UI. All right, so what I'm going to do is with this image, I'm just going to click on texture type. I'm going to set it to 2D UI. And the other thing is just under sprite mode, just make sure it's set to single. And if I click, it's going to say, make sure to save your settings. Let's hit save. What that's going to do is the image will actually get this little thing here. And that's the thing that we would use here. So if I take this and I drag it right there, you can see now it's applying that. Now it's actually still doing that kind of semi-transparent thing. So I'm going to pull it all the way open like that. Okay. Now, this is going to make it, this image does work. Unfortunately, it's going to make my text a little hard to read. So I'm actually going to add yet another panel because why not? Just so I can put it on top. And I'll shrink that down a little bit. Okay. There you go. By the way, just so you're aware, on Photoshop, we have layers and layers go from bottom up. In Unity, it's kind of the opposite. So if I were to place the background underneath that one, it's actually blocking it. Here, if I want this like semi-transparent, I'll just call it semi-transparent white backing. It has to be below the other item. Okay. And I'm going to put this in 2D mode again, and let's add some text. I'm going to say, I'm going to call this treasure chest. And let's set the font to Zendots. Okay. So maybe I'll make this text black. It's on kind of a white background like that. Let's change this text a little small. Let's center it. Okay, looking better. All right, this time what I want to do is I'm going to set up a toggle. And what a toggle means is that it will toggle something on or off. Okay, so this is another kind of UI element. So I'm going to go under game object, UI, and then toggle. All right, so when you do that, it ends up kind of this little checkbox like you might have on a form. And I'm just going to kind of move that here. And I don't actually want, this is the label, which is the thing that would appear, treasure chest, question mark. I kind of just want this part, okay? So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna delete this label because I don't really want that. This is the check mark. This is like the background. And then this is the thing that handles what what it does, okay? And I'm gonna make this a little bigger. This is kind of the background thing here. So I don't know, maybe I want it like a light green or something. And then if you did the check mark, this would be like the literal color of the check mark. So if I had like a dark green or something like that. Although to be honest, it kind of puts it around the edges. So it's not, you might want to bring in your own image there. But anyway, I want to turn this on and off. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to set this up to the, now that we have the menu, we want to hook it up to the object. So what I'm going to do is take the treasure chest, which is under environment, and I'm going to drag it. So I want to make sure toggle is set. I'm just going to lock it for now so I have access to it. And I'm going to drag this into here. Okay, treasure chest. Okay, and then I'm going to set this under game object. See where it says dynamic Boolean? These are things I can turn on and off. So what this means is that if you click once, if it's on, it'll be off, and if it's off, it'll be on. Okay. I suppose I could also do that with the static. Anything else has changed? I guess you could write some script that if it's changed, it does something. But for now, I'm just going to do that. Okay, so let's try this out. And what should happen is when I click on this, this button will cause the monster to appear, and this check mark will turn on and off the treasure chest. Okay. All right, everyone. So here in this exercise, I have the two user interface canvases. This is for the monster. This is for the treasure chest. Here's the button. If I click on it, the monster appears. Okay, now this was only to turn it on. So if I click it again, it only turns it on. It doesn't turn it off unless I wrote some other script for this. This one, though, you can see I have the checkbox here. And if I check it, it turns it off because it's no longer active as the set active is set to false. And I turn it back on. So, you could see how maybe you might, want to use something like this in your world to turn on or off items or to make something, occur where if you click on a button, something could, click on some sort of interactive element like a button or a toggle or something, that something could happen in your world where maybe it turns on an item or maybe a door unlocks, or you could, in later options, they'll even show you where it's like we could switch between objects, as our ray indicators or something. Okay.